top questions and answers that we get as DUI lawyers about whether or not you should take the breath test. So lawyers tend to over-explain things, and we could talk for hours about whether or not you should do the breathalyzer. And on the opposite end of the spectrum is that guy at the corner of the bar who's just like, don't do the breathalyzer, right? And that's the advice you get. You either get some lawyer like going way deep on this, or you get the guy at the end of the bar and you're like, should I even trust him? Like, is my uncle really, talking from experience here? We're going to try to split the difference and give you an honest, straightforward, concise, legal answer as to whether or not you should take the breathalyzer. All right, Jim, so tell us what a portable breath test is, and then are there any consequences here in Illinois if someone refuses to take that portable breath test?
Sure. So a portable breath test, or a lot of times you'll hear their acronym PBT, is used during the course of a DUI investigation. So typically the way that we see a PBT, portable breath test, come up is normally after a officer has administered most of the field sobriety tests. Sometimes I've seen it up at front, but they like to save, I guess, the best for last.
Yep.
A portable breath test is not admissible at a trial, but it is admissible at what's called a petition to rescind hearing. So in terms of, are there any consequences for refusing that PBT? There really aren't any. They can try to bring it up at trial that maybe you're conscious of some guilt, you're feeling guilty. But really, this is one of them that you want to refuse. I also would tell people to not even perform the standardized field sobriety test at all.
That's for sure.
The eye test, the walking, the standing on one leg. You're much better off just saying, officer, I appreciate the offer, but no thank you.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. There's very little consequences to refusing that PBT. Truth is, the officer is just kind of using that to confirm cover his ass, if you will, what he's already about to do, which is making a DUI arrest. Now, he's not going to tell you that. He's going to say, I'm just determining whether or not I should have let you drive home.
Right.
But really what he's determining is, oh, good, I'm making the right choice here by putting him in cuffs and making the arrest. On the other hand, there can be some consequences to refusing the breathalyzer back at the station.
That's true, yeah. So the consequences for refusing the breath test at the station, it's called the Intoxilyzer. It's a machine that most departments across the state of Illinois have. In terms of consequences, let's just start with refusing a breath test. They're going to explain that if you refuse to take the Intoxilyzer test, then your driver's license is going to be suspended for 12 months. They're also going to say that if you take the breath test and it discloses a BAC above 0.08, then your license is going to be suspended for 6 months. So the consequences of refusing it is a 6-month extension. And I should also hedge this is for a first-time DUI.
Correct.
If you're getting into
multiple DUIs, it can be long.
Exactly.
Yes.
But for a first-time DUI, you're looking at an extension of your suspension for 6 months if you refuse. Now, those are the consequences for your driver's license, but you got to be thinking long-term here. I would say to anybody, do not take this test. If you want to win at trial, it is so easy for a prosecutor to get these tests into evidence at a trial to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, because quite frankly, unless you have some miracle, you can't go against the scientific evidence.
That the Intoxilyzer wasn't, up to certification.
Right.
Those are things we look into certainly, but like you shouldn't take the test with the hope that that's what's going to happen. Right?
Right.
The way I describe a DUI to somebody who's never been through this before is that they really got two problems that they're going to need to deal with. One of them is the suspension of their license. And if this is your first time, it's probably a 6 or 12-month suspension, depending on whether or not you refuse that breathalyzer. And that sucks. You don't want to be suspended 6 months. You don't want to be suspended 12 months. But the other issue you have to deal with is that you're charged with a crime. And that is the more long-term problem for most people. And you have a very real interest in keeping that off of your record, keeping a DUI conviction off of your criminal and traffic record. And so which one of those is more important to you, right? I can make an argument for either, but typically speaking, the more long-term, long-lasting issue is your criminal record. And so by refusing the breathalyzer, you have a 12-month suspension, but you've made it a lot harder on the prosecutor to prove their case against you, right? I mean, they have a DUI on the surface is rather easy. Was this person driving or in control of the vehicle? Most of the time, the answer is yes. So now we move on to, was this person over the legal limit? Well, if they didn't do the breathalyzer, a blood test, or a urine test, there's nothing that can prove that they were actually over the legal limit. We don't know what their blood alcohol concentration was. So then the last thing, the only way that this prosecutor can prove the DUI then is by showing that they were too intoxicated to safely operate the motor vehicle. So if you're facing a DUI charge, that's what you want to be arguing about, right? That's where you got a fighting chance then, because reasonable people can disagree about the signs and symptoms of being intoxicated and the level of intoxication. So you're helping yourself out on that criminal side, probably, if you are refusing the breathalyzer despite having a 12-month suspension.
Another thing that people should consider with the suspension is, a 12-month, a 1-year suspension sounds like a lot of time. And most people think, I can't drive for a year. Well, thankfully, that's not necessarily true in the state of Illinois here. For first-time DUI offenders, the Secretary of State, the Illinois Secretary of State, issues a letter asking you if you want to apply for what's called a BAID device. Another acronym. DUIs are filled with acronyms. BAID is a breath alcohol interlock ignition device. Mouthful. Basically, it's a device.
It's a breathalyzer installed in your car. You blow it and you start your car.
Exactly. And then you also apply for what's called an MDDP, which monitoring device driving permit. Yeah. You can get that through the Illinois Secretary of State. So guess what? You can drive for that 1 year or 6-month suspension as long as you got those two things.
Yep.
So really, if I was ever in this predicament, I would be I want to beat the criminal side of this because I'm willing to fork out some of that money for that device, but I don't want a Class A misdemeanor on my record.
Right. Yep. So. And that's where most of our clients wind up.
Right.
That's where they start to prioritize outcomes and what they want to achieve with the case. And that is something we do. We sit down with our clients, talk about what their priorities are. And that's where most of them wind up. And many times they go back and say, all right, I wish I would have refused that breathalyzer.
Right.
Well, how? How would you refuse that breathalyzer? I mean, doesn't it make you look guilty? Isn't that used against you in court?
I mean, in all honesty, they are going to try to use that against you in court. When I was a prosecutor, I made a field day out of that.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they have done the, Intoxilyzer, the portable breath test? But at the end of the day, it's your right to refuse that. And I would highly recommend you exercising that right, but do it in a way where you're courteous and you're not supplying any additional information that could be construed against you. There's so many trick questions. Where were you coming from? How much did you have there?
Yeah.
So if an officer approached me, asked me to submit to standardized field sobriety test to just make sure I was okay to drive, I would say, officer, I appreciate you, but respectfully, no thank you.
And leave it at that.
Just leave it at that.
The typical DUI does not start with a breathalyzer. Now, people ask why not all the time, and that's a fair question, but the breathalyzer's at the end, either at the end when you're out there on the street or when you're back at the station. And you gotta have the right mindset. And that mindset is you're already getting arrested. Like, people are like, oh, I did the breathalyzer because I thought the officer was going to let me go.
Right.
No. Like, if you blow zeros, sure, maybe. But we're not talking about that scenario here. We're talking about, you got you pulled over for DUI and for good reason. Should you blow or not? And that answer is no. So are there any scenarios where you would recommend someone take the breathalyzer?
Now, I think there's going to be some disagreement about this. But
Sure.
For me personally, I would never take a portable breath test or an Intox. I know that it's going to be held against me if I go to a trial, but at the same time, a lot of these machines are so sensitive that they can pick up on some of the extracts in gum. There's been scientific studies to this point. And for me, no, I would say that I would never submit to a breath test. If you haven't drank in 24 hours, if you don't drink at all, okay, sure, maybe.
You could see the argument.
Right, I could see the argument.
It's hard to blame somebody who's like, I don't drink at all. Like, I haven't drank anything. I'm perfectly sober.
Right.
There's no question in my mind. It's hard to say, like, you must still refuse the breathalyzer. I
Right.
get why someone would do it.
Same, but
You personally would not.
no, I mean, I'm a scaredy cat when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it too much. There's that video of that one college student who blew zeros and he still got arrested.
Yeah.
I think that's on our YouTube
Yeah,
channel.
absolutely. Right. I mean, yes, even blowing zeros does not preclude you from getting arrested, right? You can be on, and they go, oh, well, you must be on drugs and all that, right? So,
Exactly.
So keeping it simple to the average person, don't drink and drive. And if you do find yourself in the situation with a breathalyzer being stuck in your face, you're almost certainly better off refusing it. There you have it. Those are the top questions and answers that we get as DUI lawyers about whether or not you should take the breath test.